Well, thank you very much. I'll share screen. Here we go. My name is Ami Braun. Born in Chicago, made Aliyah as a kid to Israel. Been here almost my entire life. I've had the zchut and the privilege to be involved in guiding and informal education for the last 20 years and live in Yerushalayim. And I have to say, on a personal note, there is something I'm still looking for the right word, but strange. As a veteran tour guide, I've never stood in front of more than 50 people before and guided at once. And here on Zoom, you get to 300, 400 people, and I don't see any of you. It's really strange. Let me just pin this on my face, just a second to make it easier for me. There we go. And let's make our way inside. Where are we going to today? As Tamal said, we are continuing now with our series of Arbat Arei HaKodesh, the four holy cities in Israel. Let's see where they are on the map of Israel. We started last week in Jerusalem, right over here. As usual, I will be using my blue mouse that you're welcome to follow throughout our tour. We started in Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter, last week. And this week, we took a drive up to the Galilee, the lower Galilee, right on the shores of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. Excuse me. We are going to be experiencing Tzfat, hearing the stories that the figures over there and general history have to tell us, seeing some beautiful mosaics and so much more, both ancient and modern day. In 2 weeks, we're going to come back further to the center of the country, to Hebron, which is right south of Jerusalem, and in 3 weeks from now, we're going to finish in Tzfat in the Upper Galilee. When we talk about the four holy cities, we like coinciding them with the four powers of the world: earth, water, air, and fire. Jerusalem will coincide with fire, with the passion of Jerusalem, the history, the temple, the fact that it was the Jewish capital. It's been the Jewish capital for so many millennia. We can talk about Hebron connecting to earth because of the cave of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. We're going to be in a couple of weeks. Tzfat is high up, a little cold in the winter, and which is why it connects with air. Tevelia is water, the big drop that we can see over here. And it's water because it's actually sitting on the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. It's in the background over here. But I'm going to repeat what I said last week very briefly, because some of you might have not been with us last week. But the idea of the four holy cities comes from where? It's a concept that's between 300 to 400 years old. Depends which city we're talking about. And it's because these cities connected to what's called Vada Chalukah, the committee of donating money, Jews from Europe giving money to the Jews of these cities over here. And in general, these cities are cities with a lot of Jewish history. And Taveria, believe me, has a lot of history to it. We're getting an overview, a bird's eye view over here of Taveria. We are now looking from east to west, as opposed to most maps where the top of the map up over here is going to be north. That's not the case over here. In this case over here, the top of the map is facing west. We can see the bottom of the map has the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. The city of Taveria, Tiberias, is a city on the water. It's sitting on the shores of this fresh lake of the Kinneret. So it has a nice coastal area over here. Then you can actually drive up and make your way into the neighborhood of Poria, which is overlooking Tevelia from the top over here. And then we continue to the hills of the Galilee, and we're going to continue further west. Where does the city Tevelia, when does it begin? Where does it come from? What's its story? Who's it named after? Well, to answer that question is actually pretty simple, as opposed to other cities where we're like, well, maybe here. Tevelia is pretty simple. The year 20 of the Common Era, 1st century, we're going to have the son of King Herod the Great. Let's hear about King Herod the Great builder. I'm not talking about him today. His son, whose name is Herod Antipa, is going to be the ruler of the Galilee, the ruler of the Galilee. And what he's going to do, he's going to build a city called Tiberias, named after who? Well, that's an easy one. Named after Tiberius Caesar, the ruler in Rome at the time. Now, Herod Antipa, when he builds a city, and let's pinpoint a little bit where Tiberias was 2,000 years ago in the 1st century. It's not this whole city of Tevelia that we see today. It's actually, and we're going to be landing on it pretty soon, it's actually a little south of what we know of downtown Tiberias of today. I'm going to be going back and forth between Taveria and Tiberias. So you say the name of the city in Hebrew and English. So both, it's the same thing, 2 different languages. Tiberias, the original Tiberias built by Herod Antipa in the 1st century, is south of the city, and it's about right over here. Okay, follow my blue mouse. Here we go. This is the area of ancient Tiberias. Today's entrance to the city that we're going to be using Google Street View to walk through, it's going to be a lot of fun, is actually more like in this area over here. Okay, so we're coming to over here, and Herod Antipa has an issue, has a problem when he decides to build Tevelia over here, and that is that this area is the graveyard. All right. Now we're talking about first century, where tumaim tara, purity and impurity, is a very central part of life. And because this is a Jewish graveyard over here, Jews do not want to come and live over here. So Herod Antipa, what does he do? I can imagine opening the newspaper and opening up the economic section, reading, come move to Taveria, free land. I'm giving it out to you over here. I'm going to build your homes over here. And guys, when you do move here, you know what? You're going to get tax breaks. I'll move to there, a place like this. This is to encourage people to move to here. And despite this, the Jews do not want to move out to these areas over here. So who is going to move to this area in the first century when Herod Antipa builds it? We're going to have the poor people. We're going to have relief slaves. We're going to have Samaritans, but not the general Jewish population. And if we open up Josephus Flavius in his book, Jewish Antiquities, Josephus Flavius is going to live in the first century during this time of the beginnings of Tiberias. And he's going to describe Herod Antipa building Tiberias. And he says, when he builds it, he says he will transgress the Jewish ancient laws because many tombs were to be there. Right? We have a problem over here. But you know what? Tiberias is a little complex. Let's, go to another source about Tiberias. It's going to jump in right over here. And let's ask the question, where does the name Tiberias come from? We're still at the beginning, so we're still playing around with the name. We mentioned a simple answer that's named after Tiberius Caesar, pretty obvious answer. But if we open up the Talmud Bavli, all right, the Gemara, the Talmud, the Jewish sources, the Talmud Bavli was written about 1,500 years ago. It's going to call Rabbi Yirmiyah, who lives in Tiberias, during the time of the second century when Jews do start coming to Tiberias. How and why? We'll get to that in a minute. And Rabbi Yirmiyah said, and why was it called Tiberias? Because it sits in the very center of Eretz Yisrael, in the Tabur. Now, this is where a lot of times things are lost in translation from Hebrew to English. Tevelia is similar to the word Tabur. Tabur is like a pupik. It's the center. Tabur shel olam, the middle, the central area. And Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying is sitting in the center of Israel at that time in the border, and as he was looking at the geography back then. So we have different sources and ideas behind the name Tevelia. But again, we still have our problem. How are Jews going to get over the issue of the graveyard in the area of ancient Tevelia? Ladies and gentlemen, let's introduce none other than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the tumulus flowers, the lupine flowers. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is a sage who's going to live about 100 years after Tevelia is created. We're talking in the second century. Let's go back over 1,800 years ago. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai has to run away from the Romans at a certain point. And when he runs away from them, he's going to hide in a cave for 13 years. I can imagine coming out of a cave, living there for 13 years, you're going to have skin issues. And now what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he's going to come to the springs of Hamat that are this area over here today, in the southern area of today's Taveria. This is the area of ancient Taveria back then. Okay, again, today's Taveria, really, the entrance comes in from about over here. We're not there yet. We're still right south of Taveria, along the 9D highway. And what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is going to do, he is going to take the seeds of lupine flowers, and he's going to walk around this area over here, and he's going to plant them on the ground. And he's going to say, wherever these seeds will grow the flowers, that shows that there's a graveyard over there. And if they grow, it'll grow flowers. They'll dig out these areas over here. They'll find the graveyards. They'll move them. And with that, the city is going to become a city that will start attracting Jews a lot more. And Jews will start coming and settling ancient Tevelia, this area over here that I'm showing you with my blue mouse. And the Talmud Bavli, I couldn't find a translation. It says about the story, it's the Rashi, the commentary, Talmud Bavli, which I couldn't find an appropriate translation, but it's telling the story that I just said right now. And really, here, our story now is going to begin. We're going to jump now into second, even more third century Taveria, when Taveria really becomes a center for the Jewish spiritual and political echelon. What do I mean? Let's jump forward for a minute, one picture, and then we're going to come back to this. Let's go find the root of the Sanhedrin, these sages that were the Jewish leaders of that time. And this will lead us back to the picture before. This will lead us to Taveria. The Talmud will tell us that the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leadership, is going to wander from Jerusalem. They're there during the time of the Second Temple. When the Second Temple is destroyed, they're going to go west to Yavne. So they're going to sit with Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and more. Then they're going to make their way north up to the Galilee. They're going to come up to Usha and Shpar'am. Then they're going to make their way to Beit She'arim, where today we can see beautiful sarcophagi inside of caves. They'll go to Tzipori. Okay, they're going to arrive at Tzipori at the end of the beginning of the 3rd century, led by none other than Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was going to compile the Mishnah. How does all of this connect to Tiberius? Because in the following generation, after Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, his grandson, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi'ah, he's going to come with the Sanhedrin. We're now talking 3rd century era, and they're going to come from Tzipori to Taveria, to Tiberias. Welcome to Taveria. Tiberias becoming the Jewish center of that time. And it's going to be the Jewish center in the land of Israel for the next several hundred years, because a lot is going to be going on over here. We're going to have the Sanhedrin, the Jewish sages that are going to be here through the 5th century. Okay, we're going to have Anshe HaMesorah, the people of the Mesorah that are going to sit. And 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th century, they are going to sit and finalize the words and the letters in the Torah as we know them today, 1,000 years ago. The oldest full Tanakh Bible that we have today, or almost full, but that's a different story. A Tanakh, a Bible called the Aleppo Codex, was written in Tevelia. It'll wander all around, but that's with Anshe HaMesorah, the people that are sitting and writing exactly the words of the Tanakh of the Bible and the Torah that we have today. They will be in Tiberias. And well, let's visit some of these people over here. And in order to do that, we're going to enter into the antiquities, into this ancient city of Taveria from back then. We're going to come in, if we're traveling from near and far, we're going to enter the ancient city right over here. And when we enter inside into the city right over here, we're going to be met by 2 big towers, one on the left side over here, and the other on this right side over here. They date back to the time of the 1st century Roman era. And I can just imagine we're walking in 3rd century, 4th century, and we'd be awestruck looking at these different figures, leading political and spiritual figures in the Jewish world of that time. Now, our sages tell us in the source in Dvarim Rabbah, when they're describing what the great Og Melech HaBashan, Og the king of Bashan, looked like, this figure from the time of the Torah, they will also talk about these towers that we see on the right and on the left, and from there we can also realize that they were pretty big. What does it say in the source of Dvarim Rabbah? When our sages are trying to describe Og the king of Bashan, it says that they would say if he would sit on Pile of Tiberias, Pile of Tiberias, Pile Tevelia, where the city guard towers that we're looking at right now, his feet would reach the ground, right? The towers are high. Over here we see what remains from back then. He'd sit down, and a lot of time, I have memories when I was a kid, I'd sit on a chair and my feet would sort of dangle. His wouldn't dangle. Massive towers, he'd sit on them, his feet hit the ground over here. And what we're really going to do right now is, now that we've walked through these towers over here, it's time to walk on a Roman era cardo. It's going to lead us from these towers into the city. And we're going to meet some of the activities that went on inside the city. Some of them made sense a little bit with, a place that you would, it fits with the kind of place that you would expect, where you have the spiritual and political Jewish echelon. And some things we're going to see will make it a little difficult. They're going to raise some question marks. But along the way, let's meet a couple of the famous sages that actually were walking along in Taveria at that time. Regarding the story, it'll take place in the Jordan River that's right over here, that's right next to Tiberias. It's right south of over there. Let's meet Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, 2 very, very good friends, at least at a certain point in their life, who learn together in the areas that we're walking right now. And the story in the Talmud Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud, will go like this. He'll say one day, Rabbi Yochanan, okay, this leading sage, was bathing in the Jordan River where this picture's landed right now. At that point, a man by the name of Reish Lakish saw him and jumped into the Jordan pursuing him. Why? Because he's a thief. At that time, Reish Lakish was the leader of a band of marauders. Rabbi Yochanan sees it. Sister Reish Lakish. He looks at him. Your strength is fit for Torah study. Reish Lakish is going to look back at Rabbi Yochanan and say to him, your beauty is fit for women. Rabbi Yochanan says to him, said to him, if you return to the pursuit of Torah, I will give you my sister in marriage, who is more beautiful than I am. Reish Lakish accepted this upon himself to study Torah. Why am I bringing this story? Because it brings us into this environment, into this feeling over here regarding who's walking around a little bit. These are some of the people that we would see over here as we're entering into Tevelia. I promise you, we are going to get to the Google Earth pictures and Street View that I like walking around in. That'll be in the second half of the tour, though, in a little bit. In the meantime, we're going to use some still pictures. And as we're walking along now, okay, we've seen Reish Lakish, we saw Rabbi Yochanan, we've seen a lot, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yassi, and all these different figures over here, who even themselves at the end of the day are going to compile the Jerusalem Talmud that will be compiled in Tiberias. The Babylonian Talmud will be in Babylon, but the Jerusalem Talmud will be in Tiberias. These are serious people, and now we're going to find ourselves walking into where? Into a theater, all right? And you'll be asking, wait a minute, this is a little strange. Yeah, we're now walking into a Roman era theater. We're now in, which is right next to the entrance that we saw before. It's in the ancient town of the Sanhedrin city. We're making our way, and this is the back area. Sort of when you go to a big theater today, like for example, when I go to sports games, when I visit the United States, love American sports. Before you go in, you see the field, you come to the back area where we have all the vendors. So that's this area over here. You get your hot dog for the games. You get your ice cream. All right. You get your hamburger. If you keep kosher, of course, the ice cream is parev. And you're making your way through. This one I always get excited because for me, it's from here when you walk through the vomit, turn the vomit silat, and then you suddenly see the whole field in front of you. It blows me away. That's my thing. And we're going to do that now. We've come through the concession stands in the back of this theater over here. And now we went inside. Okay. And what goes on in the theater of that time? Well, let's take a look. First of all, let's understand its structure. And let's bring it to life with what happened over there. Okay. We're going to walk into the theater. We barely see the halls that'll lead you in the vomitorium, one over here. And they've sort of been ruined over the years. The theater in its heyday in the Roman era, 16, 17, 1800 years ago, it fit 5,000 people. It's a lot of people. We can see the orchestra down below over here. We can see the podium in the front. And if today, I grew up watching TV series like Friends and Seinfeld comedies or different kinds of dramas. Same thing back then. You'll have your dramas, you'll have your comedies, you'll have the pantomime that'll come into the orchestra over here and he'll act out a full act. He won't say a word, right? But he's going to act everything out, and the whole crowd of the 5,000 strong, they're going to sing and say whatever, the pantomime is doing over here. Sometimes they'd fill up the orchestra with water, right? And you block off the sides, like right over here, for example, with a temporary little wooden door or wall. And after filling this up with water, the orchestra up with water, you'd reenact, all right, battles from the high seas in the Roman era with boats and whatnot. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. In the back area over here, we'd have a big wall, which was really the scanner front. Here we see a picture that'll help us understand. We can see this colorful scanner front over here, the backdrop wall of the theater. And there was a lot of thought also put into this theater over here when they were building it, because think about it for a minute. The sun rises in the east, also 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. Of course, it hasn't changed. The east is on this side over here, the side of the Sea of Galilee. It's going to set in the west, which is on the side that's on the bottom of our screen over here. But during the day, it doesn't go right over your head. It goes in a bit of a southerly direction, which is the right side of the screen. I'm telling you this because when you're in this theater, your back is to the sun and you're looking at the plane, the sun isn't bothering you, right? So there was a lot of thought put into this over here. And now we're starting to ask the question, wait a minute, Ami, you're talking about all these Roman games and events going on over here. A moment ago, you spoke about the Sanhedrin and the Jewish spiritual and political leaders. What's going on over here? So let's start with the story, okay? And the story tells us of three different figures talking about a theater during the Roman era. One of them is a man whose name is Yehuda ben Gerim. And Yehuda ben Gerim says, wow, look at all these sites that the Romans will build over here, the theaters and the marketplaces and the bridges. He's looking at it in a positive way. Next, and there's a man whose name is Rabbi Yossi, doesn't say or doesn't respond. Bring along the third figure, who we already mentioned, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's going to say, what are you talking about? They're bringing their theaters here for their culture. They're bringing their marketplace over here to put their prostitutes over there. They're bringing their bridges here to stop us along the way and take our taxes. We don't want any of this. Why am I bringing the story? To show the conflict, all right? The differences of opinion that was going on at the time. We don't know exactly how the Jews dealt and the Sanhedrin necessarily dealt with the theater over here. Maybe a lot of the Jews simply, along with the sages of the Sanhedrin, didn't go to the theater over here at all. That was what they did. The others did. We're not connected to it. On the other hand, maybe there were huge Jewish events that took place in the theater over here. Imagine Madison Square Garden today, if you live in the United States, or Yad Eliyahu, which today is called Nokia Hall or Stadium. I can never get used to its new name in Tel Aviv, or Maccabi Tel Aviv place. And think about huge events that'll take place with, learning finishing of the Shas, for example. All right, finishing. There's the every 6 years you finish learning the Daf Yomi of the Talmud, the daily learning page. A lot of these things will take place inside of huge theaters today. Maybe they had events in this theater over here back then. So sort of putting this together over here in this somewhat complex situation, there's a lot of different options that could take place over here. But if we're still walking through ancient Taveria, maybe we're going to also want to visit, there it is. We were going to want to visit the ancient synagogue of Hamat Taveria over here, and it is a truly beautiful synagogue. Taveria is hot. We just walked a couple hundred meters, a few hundred feet in order to walk through the antiquities. So I suggest you take a drink, especially if you're there in July, August. Ooh, that's a hot one. We're going to now enter a 4th and 5th century era synagogue, meaning dating back 15, 16, even 1700 years ago. And when we come into the synagogue over here today, we can see the area of the bima over here, okay, where they put the ark and the Torah scroll back then. But what we're going to focus on are the beautiful mosaics that are on the floor over here that A, are just beautiful in as of themselves, but B, will also raise more questions. Wait a minute, what's going on over here? There's something I wouldn't necessarily expect to be in a synagogue. So let's quickly jump in. What we're doing right now is we're going from the top. I'll show you again the order that we're doing it. We're going to start by looking at the mosaic of the ark that's on the top over here. Then we're going to come look at the zodiac, and you might be asking, the zodiac in a synagogue? We'll talk about that. And then we're going to finish by looking at the dedications. I wanted to show you this just so that you understand where we are at every given point. We're going to start with the ark over here. Okay, that's underneath the bima. Let's take a look. What can we see in this mosaic over here? First of all, we can see the entrance to, it's like the Aron Kodesh, the ark over here. Now in the middle is something a little interesting. We can take a look at this. What looks like a folded, what's the word I'm looking for? Parochet is the word in Hebrew. A covering, the covering of the doors over here, and it's folded very nicely over here. That's what we're looking at over here. We can see the menorahs on both sides, side number 1 and side number 2. What was put in these mosaics over here were various artifacts that were a lot of times used in Beit HaMikdash, used in the temple. We are remembering the temple that has been destroyed with these artifacts that we can see in the mosaics over here today. So on both sides, we can see the menorahs. Please note, these are 7-branch menorahs. This is not a Chanukiah that you light on Hanukkah, which is 8 plus 1 branches. It's the menorah from the temple itself. What we can also see is on one side over here, and on the other side over here, the Arba'a Minim, right? The 4 agricultural species that were used on Sukkot. We're talking about the lulav that's sticking out over here, the palm tree branch, right, that's sticking out. We can see the citron fruit, the etrog that's over here, and sort of sticking out on the sides, we can see the hadas and the araba, the myrtle and the willow. I'm impressed. I remember those names. Growing up in them in Hebrew, I really had to drum those names in English into my head over the years to remember them. But there we go. The Arba'a Minim that were used 7 days, all 7 days of Sukkot in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, they're also put over here. We can see the shofar, the ram's horn on one side and on the other side. And above that, we can see the machta on both sides. The machta was the shovel that used for coal in the temple on the sacrificial. Let's now move down from this area over here to the zodiac. all right? And as we're looking at the zodiac over here, we can see the zodiac split up into 12 months of the year. And what's interesting is in the middle, okay, from these zodiacs, we can see Helios, the sun god, holding a globe in his hand and sort of rays of sun sticking out of his head over here. Helios, the sun god, inside of a temple. That's very, very strange. But we'll get to that in a minute. And in the corners of the mosaic over here, we can see, let's try to read this together, okay? It says it in Hebrew that if you can read Hebrew, it's definitely readable. It says here, Tkufat, and the other word here is Tammuz, the month of Tammuz, which is the summer, about July. Or if we go to over here, we can see it's a bit harder to see, but it says Tkufat Tishrei. Tishrei is going to be the fall. It's the time of October. It's the time of the Chagim, the time of the holidays. So this is Tammuz, the summer. This is Tishrei, the spring. Here we're going to have in the corner over here, we're going to have the winter. In the top left corner, we're going to have the spring. What's the story? What is this zodiac over here telling us? And how does the synagogue have a zodiac inside of it? So what it's telling us over here, it's trying to show in many ways how the Jewish calendar is working. In the Jewish calendar, we go both lunar and by the sun. So the months are lunar. We go according to the new month. Hence, we have these 12 different months that we can see over here. But also we go according to the sun because the months of the year are always need to be connected to a particular season, or the holidays need to be connected to a particular season. For example, Pesach, Passover, is a holiday of the spring. So you need to coincide when you're in the Jewish year, both the moon and the sun. Maybe that's why Helios, the sun god, is in the middle over here, because we also go according to the sun and not just go according to the moon. And let's see, the month, this is the Aryeh, Leo over here, okay, which is around July, August. And July, August is this month, okay? We go again, lunar months, but to keep it according to the seasons, we also have to use the sun. It connects with all the time, it'll connect with summer. That's this corner over here, Tammuz, the summer, right? If we go, I always like going to my month just because it's mine. I'm on the other side, Dagim. Pisces over here. Pisces is going to be next to Dli, which is Aquarius. And that's going to be over here in the winter months. Now, just for fun, we can take a look. If we open up Dli Aquarius, it was written backwards. All right, all the other months are written from right to left. For whatever reason, somebody wrote Dli wrong. Maybe he's looking at it in a mirror. I don't know exactly. So that's also interesting to point out that we can see over here. And just like in every synagogue, you think it was different back then from today, you give, you show respect to the donors who are going to donate money for the building of the synagogue. Over here, it's written in Greek. And you might still be sitting at home and saying, but I don't get it. We're in a synagogue. Still, how can you put a zodiac? How can you put human figures? How can you put dumuyot inside of the synagogue? And look, a lot can be said about that, and a lot can be written about it. And at the end of the day, the use of different symbols at that time, for example, the use of different symbols in different religions at that time, both in Christianity with crosses and with Judaism, with the menorahs, was something that was becoming very prevalent, right? So just like non-Jews were using different kinds of beautiful mosaics and their structures, so too the Jews felt comfortable at that time to be able to use figures like this inside of in mosaics inside their synagogues. This was not something that existed a few hundred years before at the end of Second Temple era, but it was something that the Jews did feel more comfortable with a few hundred years later. All right, now that we're talking not about the Second Temple era, but about what's called the Mishnah in Talmud era, to yes, put figures like this inside the synagogue. No one is praying to them. They're being seen as art only, and maybe to give a message, like the message regarding the yearly cycle, as I was talking about before. If we want to find a couple of sources from that time that were written about the use of these different figures inside of mosaics, we can go to the Babylonian Talmud to check it out, where it says, during the days of Rabbi Yochanan, meaning 3rd century, they started drawing on the walls and no one stopped them. And we could also, a page from the Geniza in St. Petersburg was found regarding the days of Abun from the 4th century. The days of Abun, they allowed to draw mosaics and no one stopped them. So this was something that was prevalent and happening at the time. Did the rabbis agree more, agree less? We can have a whole conversation about that, not right now, because the idea isn't to delve too deep into that, but to move on, because we have another 1,500 years to cover the next maximum half an hour. Purim's around the corner. I know Tamar was talking about that and about the different events that will be taking place in Beit Avichai. So let's join Purim for a minute in Taveria. Excuse me. And the idea is like this. Cities that were surrounded by a wall from the days of Joshua bin Nun, Yoshua bin Nun, from the book of Judges, from when the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, Israel of today, over 3,000 years ago, cities like that, you celebrate Purim on Tet Vav Adar, on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Adar. Comes out in March usually. This year comes out in February. If you're in any other city not surrounded by an ancient wall, you will celebrate Purim the day before, Yudaled Be'adar, the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Adar. Okay, so what's the story with Tevelia? Well, let's jump into over here. It says like this in the Babylonian Talmud, in Shana Megillah. It says, Hezekiah read the Megillah in Tiberias both on the 14th and on the 15th of Adar. Why? He wasn't sure, because he wasn't certain if it had been surrounded by a wall since the days of Joshua bin Nun or not. Now, if that's what he did, Rabbi Yudah Hanasi is going to come along, and he says that Tiberias had been surrounded by a wall in the time of Joshua, which means we only celebrate on the 15th. Look, at the end of the day, Tiberias is a question mark. If we walk into Tiberias and and ask the residents over there, what do you do? At the end of the day, in general, what's done? Well, I can imagine different people do different things because of the uncertainty. Was it surrounded by a wall or not from the days of Joshua bin Nun is in the old city of Taveria. Let's go back for a minute to the beginning. In the old city of Taveria, here we go, right over here. In Taveria's old city, which is, people don't live in the original area of Tevelia so much anymore, which is over here, but rather today's old city, which is right on the waters about over here. They'll really keep it on the first day, on the 14th day of Adar, and on the 15th day of Adar, sort of half keep it, right? You read the Megillah, but without the blessings. If you come up the mountain to what is obviously the newer part of Tevelia over here, you really only keep it on the 15th. And you might be asking, Ami, wait a minute. There's a bit of an issue over here. Just a second ago, you said that Tiberias wasn't from biblical times. It was created in the 1st century, all right, by Herod Antipa. That's over 1,000 years out, way over 1,000 years after the time of Yoshua bin Nun. So right north of Taveria, of Tiberias, there are archaeological remains of a town called Rakat. And that's biblical, and that's the book of Joshua. Was there a wall around it or not? Remains as a question mark to which we do not have an answer. We're going to jump forward in time now. We're going to leave the ancient Roman times and the time of the Sanhedrin and the writings of the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, which was written in Tiberias and not Jerusalem, and let us go visit one of the more famous figures, Jewish figures in history, and that is none other than the Rambam, than Maimonides. And now we can have a little fun. We're going to start using Google or Street View and whatnot. And what we're looking at right now is actually the crown. It's the shape of a crown, as you can see. The most recent adding that was built on top of the grave of the Rambam of Maimonides. Let's just twist around a little bit, just have a bit of fun. This is the entrance over here that you'll walk past these trees on our way to the grave of the Rambam of Maimonides. Let's look around a little bit more just to get a bit of a feel more of where we are in Taveria. Here we go. Here's the street. And today you can come inside, walk up this path, walk beyond this wall, and we'll get to the grave of the Rambam underneath this crown. Now, what we're going to do is let's go back, though, to our PowerPoint, and let's say a few words about the Rambam. The Rambam did not live in Tiberias. He didn't live in Tevelia. He actually was born in Cordoba, Spain, spent a lot of his life, though, in Egypt. He was the doctor in the royal palace at that time. Salah ad-Din was the ruler that Maimonides was his own physician. And Maimonides is something you don't even know where to start from when talking about him. He played such a central role in Jewish history regarding the impact that he had with all the writings that he had. He wrote the Mishneh Torah, the Yad Chazakah. The Mishneh Torah is a codex of Jewish laws that he's going to write during his life in the 12th century. He's going to write Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, a monumental philosophical book talking about belief and religion, Judaism, etc., and whatnot. He's going to write the 13 Principles of Faith, in Judaism. We can see the statue of Maimonides or the Rambam in Cordoba, Spain, okay, where he was born. We don't know what he looked like, okay? Picture of somebody, not necessarily the Rambam. And we can see the stamp over here on the left, stamp of Israel. And the Rambam is going to write in his book, Yad, in his introduction to the Mishneh Torah, Yad Chazakah, same thing, a series of 14 books, which is a codex of Jewish law. He writes in the introduction, he's going to write all of the writings of the Babylonian Talmud. Israel needs to keep to them due to the fact that all of Israel agreed to the writings of the Talmud. And I write that simply because it's in Tiberias that the Jerusalem Talmud was written, the Babylonian Talmud in Babylon, but the Jerusalem Talmud was written in Tiberias. So because they're both of them are the Talmud, I wanted to bring that sort of connected to Tiberias. But again, what exactly is Maimonides' connection to Tiberias? A camel. No, a little bit more than that. According to a later source, okay, there will be a source written about 300 years ago that will describe the Rambam saying to his followers towards the end of his life. Again, I'm reminding you he's in Egypt. But when he dies, to please put him, Al tikvereni b'Mitzrayim. All right, don't bury me in Egypt. All right, I want to be buried in Israel. And after he passes away, his followers will put him on a camel, and the camel, according to this legend, will start making its way into the land of Israel. And no one knows, should he bury him here? Should he bury him there? Every place in Israel wants the Rambam, Maimonides, to be buried by them, because it's a huge honor for the Rambam to be buried over there. So they leave it up to the camel. According to this legend, this camel will eventually arrive in Tiberias, and will get to spot where, according to tradition, none other than Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great Jewish sage from the 2nd century, is buried. The camel will stop over there, and the Rambam will be buried over there. And it was only 30 years after the Rambam is buried over there, we're talking about the 13th century, that there are already travelers that are writing and saying that this is where he is buried. So it's very interesting, and to talk about the Maimonides, the Rambam connection to Tevelia. But we're going to leave Maimonides, now that we're in the Middle Ages, and we're going to meet a very influential and special lady. It was a little bit before her time regarding Zionism and creating a state of Israel, but she definitely spoke about it. And in order to speak about her, let's go back to Google Earth, and we are going to visit the Donagraxia Hotel. And here we go for a bit of a ride, and we've landed. And here in Taveria, we can see the Donagraxia Hotel. Here's the entrance again, just for the effect. If we want to take one step to here, we get to see a bit where we're at. If we twist and turn a little bit over here, we can see classic Taveria. All right, we'll take another step or two to the other side, and we get a bit of a feel of the Donagraxia Hotel over here. Here's the entrance. Now, who is Donagraxia? Donagraxia, born in 1510, was born under the name of Beatrice de Luna. And she was born in Lisbon, Portugal. She was born at a pretty unfortunate time. The beginning of the 16th century is not a time you want to be Jewish in the areas of Spain and Portugal. The Jews were kicked out of Spain, were forced to become Christian in Portugal, which is why in Lisbon, Portugal, the Donagraxias, or Beatriz de Luna's family on the outside are going to practice Christianity. But on the inside, secretly, they are Jews. Now, Donagraxia is going to marry a man whose name is Francisco Mendez. Francisco Mendez is going to create himself a situation where he has a monopoly on the pepper dealings in Europe. And this makes the family of Donagraxia and Francisco Mendez extremely wealthy and influential. Donagraxia is going to use the wealth and the political power that she's going to be wielding in her hands to help Jews escape the Inquisition and escape into places where they can live safely. Donagraxia herself and her family need to run away several times. If she's born over here in Lisbon, in Portugal, in Western Europe over here, she eventually is going to run away with her family to Antwerp, Belgium. From there, she's going to run to Venice, Rome, and then from there, she'll reach Istanbul, as we say in Hebrew, La Muchavana Nachala, where she can rest a little bit more. And over there, she can practice her Judaism a little bit more. I mean, not a little bit more, she can practice her Judaism out in the open, and she can help Jews that were in trouble with the Inquisition and wanted to run away and live the Jewish life. She can help them as much as possible. What is Donagraxia's connection to Taveria? By the 1550s, Donagraxia is going to actually get permission from the Turkish Sultan. The Turks, the Ottoman Empire at that point, are ruling in Israel. She's going to get permission from the Turkish Sultan to lease land to collect taxes from Jews that will be living in Tiberias. Tiberias at that point, nothing's going on over there. Okay, it's a ruined city. Donagraxia is trying to create an independent Jewish entity in the area of Tevelia, a place for Jews to come and to live. And she has the permission to have them settle over there and build up a place over there and collect the taxes. There were Jews from Tzfat and other areas that are going to come and live in Tiberias and some of the surrounding towns that Donagraxia was in charge of. Donagraxia, though, is going to pass away in 1569, and this project is going to fall into the hands of her son-in-law, Don Yosef Nasi. And unfortunately, what will happen is there will be other projects that the family is going to be very involved in, and Don Yosef Nasi, I want to put this at the top of his priorities, and the whole project will fall through, even though there are a small amount of Jews that will be living over there. Jews will be living over there for about the next 100 years until the huge earthquake of 1680 is going to ruin the small town of Taveria, and then there really will be nothing over there until 1740. In 1740, a man whose name is Dahar el Omar, who is a Bedouin leader, and he's in charge of the Galilee. What he's going to do is he wants to encourage people, and especially Jews, to come and live in these areas over here, because Jews coming to live over here, Jews have business, and they're able to also pay taxes. So Dar el Omar is going to turn to a man. His name is Rabbi Chaim Abulafia. He was born in Hebron. At that point, he was a 79-year-old rabbi living in Izmir, Turkey, and he's going to say to him, come and bring Jews with you to settle in Tevelia, to settle in Tiberias. And Rabbi Chaim Abulafia is going to come with his 3 children, his 2 in-laws, and 10 students. He's going to come with the following, and he's going to come into Teveria over here. He's going to start a Jewish community over here in Teveria. He's going to build up this synagogue that we can see over here called the Etsoheim Synagogue, which since then has been destroyed 3 times due to earthquakes and a flood. And this version of it was actually built in 1949. Now, Rabbi Chaim Abulafia is going to live a few more years till 1744 when he passes away. But his coming to over here is going to, along with Bahar el Omar, is going to bring Tveria to life. What is this, almost 300 years ago? And that'll lead to that's the beginning of modern day Tveria. Rabbi Chaim Abulafia is going to also talk about a man whose name is Rabbi Meir, a 2nd century sage, Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, the miracle maker. And he's going to start sending out a blue tzedakah box, right? So with a picture of Rabbi Meir in it, asking for tzedakah, saying anybody who gives charity in tzedakah, that this will bring good fortunes to this person. And that will also be the time that Taveria will be the last of the 4 cities to join the 4 holy cities, and the Chalukah, the communities that would donate money to Jewish residents living in these cities over here. And now that we're talking about the beginning of modern day Taveria, Tiberias, let's jump in for a minute. And hold on one second. Here we go. And let's see Taveria from 250 years ago, from the Turkish era, when Rabbi Chaim Abulafia and Dar el Omar will come in 1740. How big is this? When we drive into Taveria today, here we are coming in from the southern end of the modern day Taveria. And when we drive in, we can see this wall over here, and we can see this wall over here. And what we drive over on the road and many times don't even realize is this line over here, which was put here on purpose to show that this is where the wall used to be. Okay, it's running all along over here. It dates back to 1755, 270 years ago. And the length of the city is only a few hundred meters, several hundred feet, that's all. Let's walk along and let's take a step into the city, okay? And now what we'll do is let's make a jump, all right? We're gonna make a nice jump over here. And we're jumping a couple hundred meters. That's all. I want to go a little bit more forward. And we're sort of like more than halfway through the length of the Tevelia from about 250 years ago. And if you know Tevelia a little bit, I want to come stand on this crosswalk, because from over here we can see one of the landmarks of modern day Tevelia, and that's the Tayelet, the boardwalk area over here. We can walk around, lots of stores and whatnot. And gives us a bit of a feel of Tevelia today. We look to the other side over here. And also you can continue walking along the boardwalk area over here, stores, restaurants, and whatnot. But we said we're walking along the length of this 400 meters, several hundred feet of ancient Tevelia. So to do that, let's continue right over here. And as we're making our way along, we're going to see this really cool street mural. All right, take a look. Let's zoom into it. Here we go. And this picture comes to describe Tevelia, the Turkish era, 200, 250 years ago. And it's showing this arch over here, and that's the exit. We came in from the entrance. Now let's go to the exit of the city, which is literally right here. It's right in front of us. All right, let's just sort of jump over to it right now. And yeah, I knew it was going to get stuck eventually. Well, if it was to get stuck, now's the time, because this is pretty much when I'm finished using Google. Let's just try one more time. And here we go. Actually, do we want to use Google Street View more? So that's not what I just said. Anyways, this is the exit over here. We're literally walking out. We've just walked the 300-400 meters, several hundred feet of the full length of ancient Taveria. That's it. And today it's one of the main streets. It is the main street of downtown Tiberias today. Let's leave Google Street View. And what we're going to do now is look, there's a lot of stories and a lot of legends that are going to be connected to Tevelia. One of them will be Miriam's well. So if we're talking about the Middle Ages era, if it's a Turkish era a little bit before, we can join the Ari and Rabbi Chaim Vital, who were two main figures that actually come from Tzfat. We're going to be here a couple during the time of Donagraxia. In the 16th century, they're going to be floating along the Sea of Galilee, along the coast, along the shore over here on the side, and suddenly the Ari is going to take a cup and put it in the water, fill it up with water, and give it to this student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and said him, drink from this water, it'll bring you a lot of wisdom. And Rabbi Chaim Vital does, and it brings him a lot of wisdom. Why is this? Because they'd arrived at the spot that's called Miriam's well. According to tradition, Miriam, Moses' sister from the biblical stories of the Torah, she was buried over here in the Kinneret, and many other people will make their way out to the middle of the waters where they're going to collect water, saying that this is Miriam's well, not where she was buried, but this is Miriam's well. Okay, this is Miriam's spring over here, which has a lot of skulot, a lot of good things in it, and it's one of those many traditions that will be connected to Tverin. If we read Shai Agnon, the great 20th century Israeli poet, regarding Miriam's well, he'll say, "V'yam Kinneret shakadosh baruch hu mechabevo yoter mikol hayamim ekifota." And the Sea of Galilee that Hashem, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, loves more than all the other seas, is surrounding it. And Miriam's well is actually inside of the water over here. And then he mentions the Ari, and he says about him, the Ari, this mystical figure, this figure that was so much involved in mysticism from Tzfat, he comes to himself to over here and he finds the wisdom over here from Miriam's well. Let's continue on though from a lot of these stories. And now we're going to already be jumping into almost the 20th century. And let's meet the first modern day hotel or one of the first modern day hotels in the land of Israel. The first to have some of the amenities that we're going to be talking about in a moment. And again, to get a bit of a feel of this hotel, let's go back to Google Earth and let's go land outside the Reichard Grossman Hotel. Reichard Grossman is a German Templar who is going to come to here at the end of the 19th century. In 1896, he's going to build this state-of-the-art hotel in Tiberias. And again, we'll get a bit of a feel over here, twist and turn right down the block over here. We get to the Kinneret, to the Sea of Galilee. And now that we got a bit of a feel of this hotel over here, let us make our way back to the PowerPoint. And in this state-of-the-art modern hotel, he is going to create running water, which is huge. I mean, in some of the rooms, you'll have a bathtub with both hot water and cold water faucets flowing, unheard of. You'll have room service. This is the first hotel in the Middle East with room service in it, 1896. When they opened this hotel, the story goes that one of the effendis over here, the local heirs, is going to come and see the flowing water. He's going to be so impressed. He's going to take one of the faucets, he's going to bring it home and say to his wife, look what I discovered. and he turns on the faucet expecting water to come out of it. Apparently, it's a true story, which is a lot of fun to tell. A few years later, 1898, a couple years later, 1898, none other than Theodor Herzl is going to visit this hotel in his only visit in the land of Israel. And when he's over here, he also apparently sits and writes part of his book, Alt Neuland, the Old New Land. It'll be about 50 years later, 40 years later, that it's into the Kinneret, it's into the Sea of Galilee, that this amphibious airplane is going to land. Every week during the British era, we're now in the British Mandate over here, we are going to have what's called the Imperial Airways airline. You get on an airplane in London, you make your way to Italy, you fly from Italy, you land on the waters of the Sea of Kinneret, you'll spend a night or two over here in the Reichard Grossman Hotel, get back on the plane, fly to Baghdad. I wish we could do something like that today, fly to Baghdad, not so realistic. And then from there to India. The Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, and Taveria were actually on the route between London and India, which is pretty cool. Every Tuesday at 1 in the afternoon, you come, you stand, and you watch the airplane land on the water. I would find it really cool to see that today. And another thing to notice in this picture is this airplane landed in the middle of the winter. How do we know? We all love looking at the Hermon mountain range when it's covered in snow. And here we go. It is more fun when it's in color, not black and white, but still, it's pretty cool to see. Difficult times are going to befall Tevelia in the late 1930s, when in 1938 there is the Tiberius Massacre on October the 2nd at 9 at night. 70 Arabs are going to infiltrate the city. Tevelia was a mixed city, Jews and Arabs. 70 Arabs will infiltrate the Jewish neighborhood of Kiryat Shmuel, which is in Tevelia, and they will burn houses and a synagogue, and they will kill 19 Jewish residents over there. And it'll be only 3 short weeks later that Zaki el-Khadif, the very beloved Jewish mayor of Tveria at the time, will be assassinated in broad daylight by an Arab restaurant owner. Zaki el-Khadif was actually the descendant of a family that came to Tveria with Rabbi Chaim Abulafia in 1740. He was the first Jewish mayor of any mixed city in Israel, in the land of Israel in the 20th century. We don't have the state of Israel quite yet at that point. He's been mayor since 1924. He was very much involved in helping modernize the city and bring in infrastructure and create good, healthy, positive relationships between the Jews and the Arabs of the city, because Tveria was a mixed city. Very unfortunate, though, he was assassinated on the 27th of October, 1938. And if we go back to the Grossman Hotel over here and turn around to the other side, we can see right over here, this is a monument that was actually built in his memory, and we can see it's like a tree trunk that's cut off at the top. With it, we remember Zaki el-Khadif. And one of the main streets that's actually running through Taveria is called the El-Khadif Street. And as we make our way up, we're just going to make our way to this intersection over here, because from this intersection, we're going to make a right. And if we turn right over here, we are actually going to start going up El Khadif Road. This road is the main road that will lead us up eventually in the direction of the western exit or entrance of the city. So this is Zaki El Khadif Street, which is in his memory. We'll twist and turn to get a feel of where we came from. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump to the Independence War, right towards the end of our tour over here. And when we're talking about the Independence War in Tiberia, we're now getting to the months of March and April of 1948, 40 days of fighting in Tiberia. To try and get a bit of an understanding of what's going on, let's go back to a map of Tiberia at the beginning. Here we go, right over here. Tiberia, we see Tiberia of today, and we have the old city of Taveria, okay, which is where Rabbi Chaim Abulafia comes to, which is where we walked through a moment ago with the Google Earth Street View, the different things that we did over there. That's in general this section over here. Pretty small area, okay, it's this section over here. Now this section over here, the old city, was in the hands of the Arabs. It was mixed Jews and Arabs. When the independence war begins, the Jews are going to leave and they're going to go to the upper neighborhoods that are more in this area over here, such as Kiryat Shmuel and others. Meaning the Arabs are down below over here, the Jews are on top. The Jews will have the topographical advantage. The Jewish residents will outnumber the Arab residents by a little bit over 6,000 Jews to a little bit under 5,000 Arabs, and the fighters are more or less even, 500, 400 in favor of the Arabs. Within the old city, though, there is one Jewish person who refuses to leave, Chacham Abulafia, a descendant of the original Rabbi Chaim Abulafia, who came in 1740. He says, "No, this is my house. I'm not leaving." So what he'll do is he will put on his door, he'll like booby trap the door of his apartment in case somebody is going to try and break their way in. So that'll stop them from entering. If they do get past the booby trap, he says, "I put 2 bricks on top of my door. So if someone opens the door, boom, it's going to fall on his head." Wasn't quite enough. So there are some soldiers also from the Golan unit that are sitting over there with them. And the thing is, though, is that eventually they are going to be running out of ammunition. So if that's the case, what are we going to do? The fighters in Chacham Abulafia's home are going to send a swimmer by the name of Moshe Genial to the southern area of Tiberias that was in Jewish hands to ask for more ammunition, ask for help. And on April 17th, 1948, there are going to be 4 ships, let's not exaggerate, 4 boats that are going to leave Ein Gev, okay, on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. They're going to go around to the coast of the Kinneret over here. A 5th boat will join them over here with food and ammunition and fighters. And a motorboat is going to drag them to a kilometer, all right, south of Tiberias. And then the motorboat will go silent and the fighters will paddle their way in these 5 boats to very close to Rabbi Chacham Abulafia's home in the old city. They'll unload all of their equipment. During the time that they're doing this, there's cover fire that's going to come from the Jewish fighters that are upper Tiberias to lower Tiberias, simply shelling the whole bottom area, the Arab area of Tiberias is cover fire. All the ammunition will be unloaded to lower Tiberias. And the next day, April the 18th, the Arabs will put out the white flag and they'll say, "We're giving up." And they will leave the city. The British, who are still over here, will help them leave the city. And with that, the fighting in Tiberias in the Independence War is over. Years later, one of the people who's paddling on the boat over here, one of the fighters, is going to speak to one of the Arabs, who's one of the leaders of fighting. They become friends after the war. War's over, you become friends, at least in that case. And the Arab fighter officer spoke to him, said to him, "You know why you won the war?" So the Jewish former fighter said, "Why?" And the Arab said, "Because you had 2,000 guys come via the sea in order to conquer the city. We couldn't hold out." They were about 20 fighters. That was it. But hey, why ruin a good story with the fact? There you have today. A fun city, touristy city. We can see. You can go to Tevelia. You can go for boat rides. We can see with the Lido boat over here. We can go walking on the beautiful boardwalk, the central part of air to walk around Tevelia. The hot springs, Hamat Tevelia, south of Tevelia. The summer is extraordinarily hot in Tevelia. So what do? You go to the beach. Got a lot of stuff to do. Aquakef is one of the things that you can also do over there, and jumping all around on these fun activities that we can see over here. And that is also Taveria of today. So with that, I'm going to say Toda Rabba. Thank you very much. As I always say, we'll have a bit of time for questions now, but if you didn't have time to ask your question or think of something afterwards, here's my email, and I'll also write it on the chat another moment. Please email me. You're more than welcome to. And with that, I will stop.
Thank you very much, Ami. I just want everybody to know that Ami is a wonderful tour guide for real, not only on Zoom. So I hope one day you'll be able to actually see these places for real together with Ami. But I think in the meantime, Ami, you're doing a great job of taking us to these places and seeing them, different aspects, different historical periods. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Sherry wanted to know if Tveria is one of the 4 holy cities because it housed the Sanhedrin.
Also, look, I'll go again over the idea. Hold on, I was like suddenly out of breath. I was running through so fast that usually
you can take a breath of water.
Usually I have videos of myself in advance so I can breathe from it. I didn't have that one. So 1 second. And in the meantime, I'll also write my email again if anybody wants. Let me just put in my email. Just a second, and then I'll answer Sherry's question.
Your email is on. Will you put up your email?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Also because of the Sanhedrin, the idea of the 4 holy cities is like this. The concept, really, at the end of the day, is because these 4 cities that we're talking about became part of what's called Vada Chalukah, the committee of collecting money for Jews in these 4 cities from abroad: Tiberias, Jerusalem, Tzfat, and Hebron. And it's been like this since 1640, 1740, depending what city. That's the reason that they're called the 4 holy cities. Add on to that each one of these cities has a tremendous amount of Jewish history. So we also add those reasons. So yes, definitely, the Sanhedrin being in Taveria is a very central part of Jewish history that makes Taveria one of the 4 holy cities that, along with being part of one of the cities that got the money from the Chalukah over the past since 1740, it'll also connect back to the tremendous amount of history that it has, Sanhedrin definitely being a large part of that.
Okay. Daniel wants to know if the Grossman Hotel is still open.
Hostel. Yeah, the answer is yes, it's a hostel today. Yeah.
Okay. Julie is asking, well, sorry, the chat just jumped because there's so many comments. What other rabbis are buried in Tevelia besides the Rambam, and why? Like Rabbi Meir and others.
We have the Rambam, we have Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. We have a lot of them are traditions. Okay, I'm talking tradition now. I'm not talking, deep academic research. You'll have Rabbi Akiva that'll be buried over there for that's another example of someone who's going to be buried over there. There's also a tradition of the Arba Imahot, or the 4 mothers that are going to be buried over there. Okay, we're going to be, which of course is a tradition. Why has it evolved that they're buried over there over the years? Every rabbi, every person that's buried over there has their own story, and we'd have to sit and talk about each particular tradition. Some of these traditions are older, like Maimonides, which if he passed away in 1204, it was already 30 years later that travelers were saying that he was buried over there. To Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, who really is, the tradition is from the Middle Ages, it's much later. So that would be a conversation for each rabbi of itself. But in general, the Galilee, when you travel around it, you'll see a lot of burial markers of different rabbis. For sure buried there, they may be buried over there. There's a lot of stories and events to get into and talk about why each one is buried where they are.
Neil wants to know if the city of Tevelia is the largest city in the world that is below sea level, if you know.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Good question.
That's like one of those Who Wants to Be a Millionaire questions. I can tell you that I'll tell you how many people live there and how deep it is, but I don't know if I don't know.
Okay.
It's about 200, the coast area at least is 200 meters below sea level, meaning about 600 feet below sea level. You slowly make your way up the mountain when you go west, but that's the lowest point, and there's 45,000 people living over there today. In Israel, I would say, yeah. Outside of Israel, I have no idea. That's a great.
Okay, some of the questions here are okay. I think this might be our last question. Who lived in Tiberias or around the Sea of the Galilee in the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE?
Who lived there? Look, you had.
Yeah.
Well, it depends where. You have Jews living around the area of the 1st century before the coming of the first coming. If you open up the book of Josephus Flavius, you will read about, for example, the battles of the Jews against the Romans when they're conquering these areas over there. There were Jews already in Tiberias. There were Jews in Ginosau. All right. There are Jews also going further along the Sea of Galilee. If you want to talk, there were also plenty of non-Jews that are living over there in Tiberias, a lot of Nochrim, okay, non-Jews that will also be living over there. So you have a bit of a mishmash of everybody living over there. It depends which spot you want to pick along the Sea of Galilee.
Okay, I said that was the last question, but I'll take just one more anyway. Robert is asking if there is any book written about the life of Donagraxia.
Yes.
Anything you recommend?
Shoot me an email. I actually just recently saw something. I don't remember by heart. So write me an email and I will get back to you. I think it's called
Robert,
Donagraxia.
Email Ami. She's definitely a fascinating woman. I think we're going to end here now. Thank you very much, Ami. And I'm reminding everybody, Ami will be back with us in 2 weeks. And next week we have Purim programs, special programs in Hebrew and in English. So follow our newsletters and our programs on our website. Thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.